Hello everyone, my name is Saint Jimmy. Yeah, I wasn't too impressed with this one. I usually get a fair amount of enjoyment out of MCU movies, but this one didn't do it for me. It's not exactly a bad movie, it just left a pretty poor taste in my mouth. Now, before I go into it anymore, I'll just say I'll try to keep this review spoiler free, but I'll vaguely refer to a few big plot elements without saying what they are. But if that's too much for you, then, well, be warned. I think a big reason why I feel this way about this new one is because Thor Ragnarok, in my opinion, is probably the best MCU movie. At least top 3. I was a really big fan of it. I've also liked other things that I've seen from the director, Taiki Watiti. His style is definitely one of the most interesting of the huge blockbuster film directors around today. So, needless to say, I had pretty high expectations for this one. But Love and Thunder, while not bad, is definitely my least favourite film from him that I've seen. I think the biggest reason for this is the movie's pacing, which for a number of reasons is really quite bad. This movie has quite a lot going on in it. We have a fair few character arcs, some of them are pretty intense emotionally, or at least they should be. Then we also have the primary story, and then there are multiple themes which connect the plots and character arcs. But the thing is, this movie is less than 2 hours long. This is quite a weird criticism for a superhero movie. They tend to be quite bloated. But I actually wish this movie was about half an hour longer, because it would give the many storylines more time to breathe and be properly executed. As I've implied, the topics covered by some of these character arcs are really heavy. But these arcs don't have much emotional impact, at least they don't on me. This isn't because the actors do a poor job, or because the dialogue involved in them is poorly written. I think it's entirely because the movie has too much going on in too short a time. This problem also makes the movie really strange to watch in general. In the final few scenes of the movie, I knew that we must have been coming up towards the end, but it didn't feel like we were. I was a little disorientated, and while the ending wasn't bad, or it shouldn't have been, I didn't feel satisfied. Also, weirdly given that the movie should be longer, there are some parts in here which feel like they add basically nothing. First of all, why are the Guardians of the Galaxy here? I feel like there were some ideas for them when this movie was first envisioned, and that's why Thor went with them at the end of Endgame, but for whatever reason they weren't used in the final release. So the Guardians just end up being here because Thor went with them at the end of Endgame. The scene with Zeus shown in the trailer also doesn't amount to much at all, which is a shame, because seeing other pantheons of gods not from the Norse pantheon in an MCU movie sounds really cool. The other main issue I have with the movie is that it used humour quite ineffectively. This is surprising because Ragnarok and Watiti's other projects, such as Jojo Rabbit, were quite funny, but also managed to balance that humour with very serious, effective, emotional scenes. But this movie fails at that completely. The movie continues being humorous every second scene in the movie throughout. And this issue also makes it difficult for the more emotional scenes to really hit as they were intended to. In my opinion, the humour should have ended about halfway through the movie. And the quality of that humour isn't as good as it usually is for Watiti. I mean, it's still fairly funny most of the time, but there's a few repeated jokes throughout the entire movie that aren't funny at all. I mean, it is subjective to me, but I know a lot of people feel the same way about the jokes in question. The last issue I'll mention is a bit of a smaller one, and I'm not sure how much I actually hold it against the movie, but it really feels like the vast majority of it was filmed using a green screen, presumably because it was. Filming began at the beginning of 2021 in Australia, so presumably there were a fair amount of COVID rules they needed to follow, which could not have been easy to work around. But it does lead to the movie feeling a bit claustrophobic. The scenes look large visually, but we never see our characters move around in them very much, at least not without CGI assistance. I don't know, it's a minor issue, but it did bother me a little bit. Alright, I've complained about this movie too much. I'm gonna say some nice things now. And actually, there is a fair amount to like here. The acting performances are all decent, at least to the standard of most MCU movies. A special mention goes to Christian Bale's character, Gore, who's the main antagonist of the movie. He's honestly somewhat scary. which is not something I was expecting to say about this movie, and this is in part due to Bale's performance of the character. It's really quite good. The action scenes are also really well choreographed, again as per usual, but there's a lot of creativity that goes into them. I feel like it's more than usual, which is impressive given that literally every single MCU property ever has had action scenes as a major aspect. Speaking of creativity, visually this movie is fantastic. The CGI is of pretty decent quality, as always, but I'm more referring to the sheer inventiveness and uniqueness of the visuals here. The God City shown in the trailer is an example. This honestly looks like a surrealist artwork I'd see after googling Fantasy City or something. I've always assumed these artworks are too extravagant and complex to ever be created in film, but here we are, I guess. There's also a scene at the very end of the movie involving Gore, the main villain, and a certain godlike entity, and that entire scene was visually breathtaking. It was surrealist as well, but not quite in the same way that God City was. Gore's visual design and the visuals and scenes involving him were also really well done. Again, at times genuinely quite creepy. To summarize, this movie has a lot of problems, but it also has a lot of positives as well. But unfortunately, given my expectations coming into this movie after enjoying Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit so much, that leaves me quite disappointed. I was hoping for a fantastic movie, but the issues here dragged us down to decent. So, for a rating, 5 out of 10. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I said my next video from the last one was going to be the Doctor Who ranking one, but the thing is, that video, it's gonna be like an hour long. It's kind of crazy. So I decided that in between longer videos, I'm gonna start doing shorter videos like this, just to fill in the gaps, because otherwise I wouldn't upload for 2 weeks, and I don't know, I'm trying to grow this channel. So yeah. Anyway, fuck you, goodbye. Man, all these birds in literally every fucking audio clip I record, they're gonna be the end of me.